What if the riff that launched punk, hard rock, and Britpop wasn't born in a studio, but from a slashed speaker in a teenage bedroom? Before modern guitar gods and stadium anthems, there were the Kinks. They didn't just make songs, they rewired the sound of the 60s. But behind the legend is a story of brother versus brother, of bands and broken doors, of a band that changed the world, while almost falling apart. Picture 1964. Pop is polished, amps are clean, and then a roar. "You Really Got Me" slices through the air, and a new kind of noise hits the charts. It's messy, raw, human. It invented a future. Metal's crunch, punk's bite, indie's swagger, before those genres had names. So who risked everything to make that sound? And why did it come at such a cost? Behind the roar were two brothers, Ray and Dave Davies. Ray, the observer, turning everyday London into cinema. Dave, the spark, a teenage rebel who cut up an amp and changed guitar forever. But genius is loud, and family can be louder. Tours would explode, tempers would flare, and America itself would slam a door. A band that almost erased their momentum when they needed it most. Yet the songs kept coming. Not just riffs, worlds. Waterloo Sunset, Sunny Afternoon, Village Green. Where others chased trends, the Kinks built characters, streets, and lives. And decades later, their fingerprints are everywhere. From Van Halen's Turbo cover to Britpop's everyday poetry, to every band that ever tried to make distortion feel honest. Before the mainstream crowned its heroes, the Kinks redrew the map. They paid in blood, bands, and brotherhood, and gave the world a new language for guitar, for storytelling, for being defiantly British in a global spotlight. But how did a band that defined the sound also become its own worst enemy? And what moment almost ended it all, right as the world was finally listening? Stay with me, because to understand how modern rock was born, you have to start with a slashed speaker, a forbidden tour, and a song that changed everything. Chapter 1. The Spark, How the Kinks Broke Rock's Sound Barrier. What if the riff that launched punk, hard rock, and Britpop was born in a small North London bedroom, out of anger, curiosity, and a hacked-up amp? In 1964 London, music on the radio was clean, bright, and well-behaved. Beat groups were charming, R&B covers were tidy, and even the raw ones still sounded polished by the time they hit the charts. Behind closed doors, working-class kids in Muswell Hill were living something rougher. Tight money, crowded homes, and dreams that didn't fit on polite radio. The Kinks didn't fall out of a label meeting. They were built in terraced houses, school halls, and borrowed gear. By the time anyone knew the name, the parts were already dangerous. Hold that picture. Ray Davies, the Watcher. Sensitive, sharp, funny. A kid who turned everyday scenes into stories and later dipped in and out of art school discipline. Dave Davies, the Spark. A teenage live wire who loved American blues as much as he loved breaking rules. Their friend Pete Quaife on bass, steady and melodic. Mick Avery on drums, a cool pulse under all that chaos. 4 kids with a handful of songs and a point to prove. Not to critics, but to the streets they walked every day. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, the clubs in Soho were filling with bands playing Chicago blues, filtered through English amps. The Rolling Stones were getting hipper and bigger. The Beatles, already massive, were stretching pop's vocabulary. If you wanted to stand out, being good wasn't enough. You had to sound like nothing else. Ray kept writing. Dave kept turning the amp up. And then he took a razor, some say a knitting needle, and slashed the speaker cone in his little green Elpico. He chained that wounded box into a bigger amp and pushed air through the tear. The sound that came out wasn't pretty. It was alive. A hot, fuzzy roar no one could clean up. Distortion wasn't an accident anymore. It was a statement. Hold that sound in your head. Now add the riff. Ray sketches the chords. Dave answers with a two-note hammer that feels like a door being kicked in. The song is You Really Got Me. No frills, no strings, just a riff that grips your collar and drags you to the dance floor. It is simple the way a heartbeat is simple. It is loud the way a thought you can't ignore is loud. They take it into the studio, and even with a producer trying to tidy edges, the core refuses to behave. When the single lands in August 1964, it goes straight up the UK chart to number 1 and to number 7 in the US. Rock guitar has a new voice, and it isn't smooth, it crackles. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. It's not just volume, it's attitude. The Kinks weren't offering you a perfect date night. They were offering electric urgency. That riff becomes a blueprint, picked up by garage bands across the states, fed into the proto-metal of the early 70s, echoed by punk when safety pins meet speaker stacks, and later ironed into hard rock radio that still owes a debt to a torn cone in Muswell Hill. Thousands of guitarists will spend the next decades trying to sound like that mistake on purpose. Quick reality check, meanwhile, across town. A&R men want more hits that behave. The Kinks give them all day and all of the night. Same voltage. Different circuit, leaner, nastier, just as undeniable. You can feel them defining the edge most bands will only visit. And yet the band itself is still young. The rooms they play are small and sweaty. The schedules are relentless. The money never seems to add up. On stage, a glance can set off a fire. Off stage, a slight can sting for weeks. This is the chemistry. Ray's careful architecture and Dave's raw nerve colliding at speed. Hold that sound in your head. Now add London, not the postcard London, but the one of small kitchens, cheap buses, and loud pubs where a song is judged in 5 seconds. The Kinks learned to write for that crowd. Short intros, big hooks, choruses you can bark back. Where other bands court the middle, the Kinks carve out the edges and invite you there. It's music you don't ease into. It grabs you. And here's something else most histories skip. It took nerve to commit to distortion. In the mid-60s, distorted guitars could still read as broken equipment to the gatekeepers. To double down on that sound was to risk your future with every single. But the band keeps insisting. This is how real life feels. Messy, hot, a little dangerous. You don't sand that down, you turn it up. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, the charts are still full of sweet melodies and tidy harmonies. The Kinks have those in them too. Ray can write a melody that floats, but the early calling card is shock and shove. That's why You Really Got Me hits like a headline and not a lullaby. It's the moment a whole generation hears permission. You can break the nice thing to make a true thing. The first months after that hit are a blur. More singles, more tours, more interviews with the same question. Where did that sound come from? The answer never really changes. From necessity. From kids with cheap gear trying to sound like their heroes and then sounding like themselves instead. From a band that can't afford to wait for the perfect equipment, so they invent the feeling and let the gear catch up later. Hold that sound in your head. Now add character. Because here's the twist that makes the Kinks different from every amp smasher that followed. Inside that roar is a writer who sees people clearly. Even in 1964, while the riffs are storming the doors, Ray Davies is already collecting faces and places, sentences overheard on buses, the way a city looks at 5 p.m. in the rain. The spark is distortion. The engine is observation. That's why this isn't just noise. It's music with a point of view. By the end of 1964, the ledger is clear. The Kinks have proved that distortion can sell, that minimalism can feel massive, and that a song can be both street tough and chart ready. Every garage band in Britain and the US now has a map. Keep it short, keep it sharp, mean every note. The blueprint for metal, punk, and 70s hard rock is on paper. The ink is still wet. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. The price of that sound isn't just broken cones, it's pressure. Inside the band, inside the business, and soon from across the Atlantic. Success invites attention. Attention invites rules. Rules don't mix well with a band that learned to win by breaking them. The spark that made them famous is the same spark that can start fires everywhere else. So we end this chapter where the next one begins. The riff is in the world. The doors are off their hinges, and the band that shocked pop is about to do something even riskier. Swap the punch of a riff for the poetry of a life, turning London streets into songs that outlast trends. Stay with me. Because if Chapter 1 is the sound of the blow, Chapter 2 is the voice that explains why it mattered, and how a band built on distortion taught the world to listen closer. What changed when the noise got quiet? When the amps cooled after "You Really Got Me," something else lit up. A pen, a notebook, and a city full of small lives that no one in pop was writing about. This is the moment the Kinks stop being just loud and start being necessary. In late 1965 and into 1966, the British charts leaned bright and trippy. Psychedelia was coming. Flower power was selling, and everyone chased the same sunburst. Meanwhile, Ray Davies looked out the window and saw London in grey. Pub doors, rented rooms, men counting coins, women staring at shop windows they couldn't afford. The band had already detonated the riff. Now they were going to detonate the voice. The first spark wasn't a solo. It was point of view. After a year of rough tours, contract wrangles, and personal strain, the room tilted. Ray stopped writing to fill the set list and started writing to map a world. He brought in characters, street corners, the cost of living, the cost of pretending. Dave kept the engine hot. Pete Quaife's bass found lines that felt like thought. Mick Avery's drums breathed instead of hammered. They were still the Kinks. But the camera moved closer. Freeze the frame. Listen to the hook one more time. Sunny Afternoon, 1966. A sing-along that smiles through clenched teeth. Behind the lazy sway is a country in a tax squeeze, and a narrator who's both smug and broke, content and cornered. It climbs to #1 in the UK, not because it's sweet, but because it's true. Every pub in Britain suddenly has a chorus to hum when the bill arrives. The Kinks have found a new weapon, melody as social X-ray. What happened next is the first real shockwave. On Face to Face, 1966, the band refuses the psychedelic costume party. Instead of cosmic jams, you get sketches of ordinary people with extraordinary detail. Ray's London isn't a backdrop. It's a living thing. Little England gentility meets satire. The chord changes feel like someone turning a corner into another little story. Where other bands go wide, the Kinks go close. It's not louder, it's deeper. Numbers don't tell it. This clip does. Dead End Street appears with a grim, darkly funny promo film. The band as undertakers, carrying a coffin through backstreets. The sound is heavy, yes, but not with distortion, with reality. Brass blasts like a factory horn. Harmonies ache like winter. Kids get it immediately. This is what the street actually feels like. Some critics grumble. Too bleak? Too English? Too small? But small is the point. The Kinks have discovered that pop can fit an entire neighborhood into 3 minutes. The breakout sequence doesn't look like the usual rock movie, and that's why it works. Instead of one cartoonishly big moment, it's a series of precision strikes, singles that refuse glamour, arrangements that choose space over spectacle. Studio takes that serve the lyric first, not the gear. Ray starts trusting the quiet. Dave starts sharpening the edges around it. Nicky Hopkins drops piano lines that sound like sunlight on pavement. The songs don't chase trends, they argue with them. And then 1967 arrives with Something Else by the Kinks. Here, the voice turns classic. Waterloo Sunset floats in like a thought you had as a teenager and never forgot. Two people meet by the Thames, and somehow the whole city glows. It isn't just romance. It's perspective about loneliness, kindness, the way a crowded place can feel private if you choose it to. Most bands at the time tried to make you trip. The Kinks made you notice. Critics this time can't ignore it. Waterloo Sunset is instantly filed among the greatest British pop songs ever written. And not because it's technically flashy, because it sees you. Freeze the frame. Listen to the sound one more time. Hear how Dave's guitar doesn't dominate. It frames. Hear Pete's bass walk like a companion. Hear Mick let air live between the snare hits. The band has learned the hardest lesson in rock. Power doesn't always mean force. Sometimes power is clarity. But a rise is never clean. And then the backlash landed. While teens buy the singles, some tastemakers sneer. In the age of studio psychedelia, the Kinks are accused of being parochial, too obsessed with village greens and tax bills, not cosmic enough for the moment. The papers want bolder costumes. The Kinks give them sharper pens. Fans hear the future in the honesty. Critics hear a problem in the restraint. That tension becomes fuel. The band leans into being more English, not less. And that stubbornness becomes a signature others will later borrow wholesale. Britpop doesn't happen without this refusal. Meanwhile, the mechanics of the breakout grind on. Pirate radio spins the singles that sound wrong next to their neighbors and right next to real life. Club gigs turn into small theater moments. Not with props, but with pointed detail. A line lands, a laugh runs through the room, then a chorus lifts everyone together. The Kinks are inventing a mode that feels obvious now. Rock as literature you can dance to. The press wants numbers. The band has stories. But the numbers arrive anyway. Hits across 1966-67. A reputation for singles that outlast the seasons, and an audience that isn't fickle. They're seen. Every time the scene zigzags toward fashion, the Kinks write about the person wearing the clothes and the bill they can't pay. That's the liftoff. Not just success, but identity. Numbers don't tell it. This clip does. Play Two Sisters. Hear a domestic drama in under 3 minutes, told with tenderness and bite. Or David Watts, a satire that schools 1,000 later bands on how to make envy sound like a cheer. These aren't experiments. They're blueprints for British observational pop. Damon Albarn, Paul Weller, Alex Turner, they'll all drink from this well. Early Bowie listens too. Character writing as self-invention. And yet, the story under the story matters. The U.S. touring band still shadows them through these years. Cut off from the biggest live market, the band doubles down on the studio and on songs that travel without a tour bus. It's a constraint that becomes a compass. If the song can't find you in 3 minutes on a radio, it isn't done. That discipline makes the catalog bulletproof. Freeze the frame. Listen to the hook one more time. The liftoff isn't just, "We're big now." It's, "We know who we are now." Ray's pen is steadier. Dave's tone is more exact. The rhythm section has learned how to leave space without losing muscle. By the end of 1967, you can feel the next move humming under the floorboards. The characters want somewhere to live permanently. Not just a single, but a world. So here's where the chapter leaves you. After the first spark of noise and the second spark of voice, the Kinks are about to risk the one thing that scares labels more than distortion: a concept, a whole record that doesn't chase a chart, but builds a town you can walk through song by song. Stay with me. Because if Chapter 2 is the liftoff, Chapter 3 is the flight plan. How the Kinks turned a handful of singles into Village Green, mapped a nation's memory, and made albums talk like novels. What happens when a band refuses the costume party and builds a whole town instead? When late 60s London went paisley and cosmic, the Kinks chose brick, rain, and memory. This is where the myth and the craft lock together. The look, the headlines, the bands, and beneath it, arrangements so exact that if you pull one piece, the whole story falls apart. In 1968, the band releases "The Kinks Are the Village Green Preservation Society." No sitars, no lava lamp jams, just portraits. A tailor, a picture book, a train platform, an old friend who never left. The myth engine here isn't outrageous costumes. It's being defiantly ordinary at the height of psychedelia. Where others sell escape, the Kinks sell belonging. Kids copy the stance, sharp jackets, soft shoes, a little smirk that says, "I know this street better than you." Parents complain it's gloomy. The kids hear a map they can live in. Solo the rhythm section. Hear what it's doing under the vocal. Mick Avery's drums don't crash. They breathe, placing soft accents that let lyrics sit up front. Pete Quaife's bass, until 69, walks like a companion, not a bulldozer. Small passing notes that guide you from verse to chorus like a camera pan. This restraint is the trick. When the band holds back, Ray Davies' voice feels bigger without shouting. Copycats turn the guitars up and miss the point. The Kinks turn the song up. One studio trick you can't unhear after this. On Village Green, listen for stacked vocal doubles just a hair off perfect. That gentle wobble makes memory feel unstable. True to the theme, you can love the past and still doubt it. Harpsichord and acoustic 12-string brighten the top, but the mids are warm and close, like you're in the room. The sonic palette says, "This isn't a dream, this is a visit." Meanwhile, the controversy machine won't sleep. The band has a reputation for onstage volatility. The press won't let them forget the mid-60s fight stories, and the U.S. touring ban has only just begun to lift near the end of the decade. So, what do? They double down on craft. If a song has to travel without a stage, it must work on radio, in kitchens, in the quiet parts of your day. That pressure for clarity becomes a signature. Now, 1969. Arthur, or the decline and fall of the British Empire, arrives as a TV-born concept that survives its TV collapse. Classic Kinks luck. The image sharpens. The Kinks as kitchen sink historians. Not flag wavers, question askers. Victoria bangs like a parade you aren't sure you want to march in. Shangri-La starts like a lullaby and erupts into a class critique. Parents hear complaint. Kids hear permission to think aloud. Zines and music papers start covering the band like a novel in installments instead of a singles act. That's a quiet culture shock. Rock treated as literature you can hum. Freeze the frame. Listen to the hook one more time. Picture book. The guitar's chime sits on a tight, dry kit. No cavernous reverb, just room tone and a metronomic hi-hat that pushes without shoving. When the chorus hits, the harmonies aren't cathedral big. They're family photo close. You feel invited, not preached at. This is why later generations, from Britpop to indie, steal this exact intimacy. It's not about being small, it's about being near. 1970 brings Lola Verstusioen's Power Man and the Money Go Round Part 1, the most public collision of myth and craft yet. Lola is a storytelling masterclass inside a three-chord engine. It's cheeky and compassionate, a pop single that humanizes what the headlines caricature. The BBC balks at a brand name in the lyric, so Ray swaps Coca-Cola for Cherry Cola on the fly. A tiny producer's pivot that keeps the record on air without blunting the story. That's craft under pressure. The public gets the joke and the heart. The song storms charts across the world. Kids copy the sing-speak phrasing, the conversational swagger. Radio formats stretch to fit it. Club floors loosen. You can dance to a short story now. Solo the guitar. Hear the frame, not the flex. Dave Davies isn't flooding the mid-range. He's carving outlines. Slightly overdriven chords, tight tremolo picking in transitions, and quick hooks that never step on the vocal syllables. His job here isn't dominance, it's architecture. He builds the hallway, the lyric walks down. Try removing him. The tune collapses into chatter. Put him back. It's a scene. And that's why copycats never quite felt right. Bands imitate the topics, the accents, the wink. But they miss the timing. The exact bar where the drum sits back half a hair to let a consonant land, the way the bass holds a root under a wandering melody so the story feels grounded, the choice to let an acoustic guitar click on the backbeat like cutlery in a cafe. These are micro choices. Miss one, and the song loses its human temperature. 1971. Muswell Hillbillies. The image tilts again. Pub room horns, country-tinged textures, and lyrics about surveillance, housing, and the polite ways institutions squeeze you. The myth here isn't shock value, it's stubbornness. The Kinks won't go where fashion points. They point where life is. Culture shifts in their wake. Writers in the 70s and beyond learn that you can be theatrical without lying, that a character can be big and still carry a small truth. The Who amplify rock theater. Bowie turns character into cosmos. Queen stages grandeur. But the Kinks theater keeps the ceiling low enough that you can touch it. One studio trick you can't unhear after this. Listen to the horn voicings on Muswell Hillbillies. Not brassy fanfare, but pub band warmth, tucked into the same pocket as the snare. The blend makes satire feel like company, not a lecture. Engineers keep the horns dry. Tape compression glues the room. Suddenly, you're not at a rock opera. You're in a front room with very sharp people. Let's break the engine down cleanly. Riffs and harmony, short cell motifs, often 2 or 3 chords, with modal sidesteps for color. That classic Kinks bittersweet. Choruses lift by dropping instead of rising. Bass walks down while the melody opens, an emotional contradiction that reads as complicated joy. Groove and drum feel, Mick Avery. Light hands, tight hi-hat, kick patterns that serve syllables. Power from placement, not force. Bass logic, Pete Quaife, John Dalton. Melodic but anchoring. Passing tones connect scenes. Occasional pedal roots to let vocals roam. Guitars, Dave Davies. From torn cone snarl to chiming frames, knows when to be the wall, when to be the window. Slides, double stops, and tasteful dirt. Never mud. Voice and lyric, Ray Davies. Third-person cinema. Street-level detail, moral ambiguity without cruelty. The accent is a choice. Sing where you're from. Keys and color, Nicky Hopkins, etc. Piano lines that underline subtext, a bright trill for pride, a minor slip for regret. Production. Dry rooms, doubles with air, clever edits to dodge censors without wounding meaning, brass and acoustics up front so words never drown. They weren't just selling music, they were selling permission. The Kinks gave kids an attitude. You can be local, precise, a little stubborn, and still write songs that outlive fashion. Strip the tabloids away, and the secret weapon is placement. A hi-hat that sits back, a bass that holds a note, a guitar that frames, and a voice that tells the truth at speaking volume. Pull Mick, Pete, John, Dave, or Ray out, and the machine stops being a story and turns back into parts. The culture moved because they did. Zine covers swapped space dust for terraced houses. Radio learned to program songs that were stories first. Clothes got simpler, cockier. Nothing to hide behind except what you had to say. And the hard proof is what came next. Bands who built whole records as places, not playlists. The Who's grand narratives, Pink Floyd's suites, Bowie's characters, Queen's theater, each in some way stepping through a door the Kinks had already opened and furnished. So where does this road lead? Through craft and controversy, through myth and minimalism, they've built the language for big, honest albums. But there's another pivot coming. The American stage, the FM radio that loves stories with muscle, the arena where subtlety must still hit the back row. Stay with me, because if Chapter 3 proved the blueprint in the studio, Chapter 4 asks the dangerous question: can a band built on detail conquer a world built on volume? Behind the roar was a bill. Who paid it? When the U.S. touring ban finally lifted and the Kinks hit American stages in the mid-70s, the rise looked easy from the cheap seats. Sleepwalker, 1977, sliding onto FM playlists. Low Budget, 1979, thundering through hockey arenas. One for the Road, 1980, turning their songbook into a stadium playbook. Van Halen blasted You Really Got Me back into the bloodstream. Tom Petty, the Ramones, the Pretenders, you could hear traces of Kinks' DNA everywhere. But in the wings, the cost meter was running. After the first rush of FM success, the room tilted. The math changed. American tours meant miles, hotels, radio schmooze, union rules, and a nightly race to make delicate songs hit the back wall of an arena. Kinks shows were equal parts theater and fistfight. Precision lyrics trying to live inside stacks of volume. Labels wanted choruses that punched, singles that didn't confuse program directors, albums by the holiday window. The band who once broke rules by being specific now had to survive by being consistent. That's a different kind of pressure. We're going to sit with this for a second. The strain wasn't new. The 1965-69 U.S. ban had kneecapped their early momentum. Pete Quaife had already left 1969, and back in 1973, after marriage trouble and business grind, Ray Davies hit a wall, an onstage breakdown at London's White City Stadium, and a public vow to quit that scared fans and press. They carried on. But moments like that don't fade. they change the chemistry. Every tour after has a shadow. Still, the American chapter booms. Jukebox music. A rock and roll fantasy. Wish I could fly like Superman. Destroyer. Come Dancing. Songs built for FM glide and MTV framing. The arenas teach them a new gear. Dave leans heavier. Ray sharpens the talk sing that pulls a crowd in close, even from 100 feet away. The band learns the stadium trick. Drama in broad strokes, then details on the come-down. And the money finally feels real. For a moment. Listen to how the tempo feels heavier now. The grind keeps taking little bites. Management disputes, tax headaches, label switches, RCO to Arista, then to MCA in the mid-'80s. The Kinks' internal weather, always changeable, turns stormy on the road. Old tensions resurface between Ray and Dave. The balance of writer versus spark, theater versus bite. Ray wants scenes and nuance. Dave wants blood in the guitar. That friction made the early records gold. In the arena era, it can be a knife. And then the backlash landed. As the MTV decade speeds up, critics start calling the band too theatrical for the new rawness, then not theatrical enough for the new gloss. Fans still show up, radio still spins, but the gatekeepers move the goalposts monthly. The Kinks keep adapting, sometimes brilliantly. Come Dancing, 1983, proof that a British memory can be a US hit, sometimes at a cost to their center. This is the part fans don't put on T-shirts. In 1984, Mick Avory, the drummer whose light hands and placement taught Kinks songs how to breathe, is out. It had been building for years. The infamous mid-'60s blow-ups were never truly forgotten. Bob Henrit steps in, a pro with muscle. The engine changes, Avery's particular pocket, the soft hi-hat patience. The way he left air for Ray's consonants and Dave's filigree wasn't just style, it was infrastructure. Pull that beam, and the house stands, but the rooms feel different. For many lifers, this is the quiet line in the sand. Without Mick, it isn't the same machine. Freeze the frame. Listen to the kick and hat one more time. Compare an arena cut of Lola from One for the Road with later live takes. The big versions slam, and slam well, but that elastic breath between snare hits tightens. On record, you still hear the writer's wink. On stage, by necessity, you often hear the charge first. It's survival. It's also drift. The business keeps nipping. Arista wants hits of a certain shape. MCA wants bigger. The band delivers, Give the People What They Want, 1981. State of Confusion, 1983. Word of Mouth, 1984, but the emotional carrying cost rises. Family life strains under long U.S. loops. Ray, forever the narrator, has to narrate himself now, aging out of the pop cycle while still carrying arenas. Dave, forever the spark, keeps turning up to cut through rooms that swallow nuance. Some nights it's magic, some nights it's wrestling. We're going to sit with this for a second. The Kinks never detonate with a tabloid implosion. They don't fade with one bad record. The turn is slower, more human. A drummer leaves, a label changes. The touring model eats the writing hours. The mood hardens by increments. The very thing that saved them in America, scale, begins to cost them the small details that once set them apart. So where does the fall land? Not in a headline, but in a threshold. By the mid-'80s, the Kinks are still packing rooms and still landing singles. But the spell, that perfect balance of intimate story and volatile spark, has to fight harder to be heard over format changes and industry speed. The era of FM dominance is closing. MTV prefers newer faces. The band is now legacy and living at the same time. That's a grace and a grind. Behind the posters was a price tag: sleep, blood, sanity. The Kinks didn't fade. They paid. In miles. In lineup shifts. In the slow burn of proving yourself again in a market that forgets last summer by January. If there's a single moment that marks the end of the run's perfect union, it's Avery's exit, the day the original Pulse left. After that, the band remains powerful, sometimes great, but never weightless in the old way. And yet, this is not a tragedy. It's the crisis that makes the third act honest, because what survives the cost is the catalogue, the map of how to be British and universal, heavy and humane, loud and literate. The American chapter taught them volume. The bill taught them value. Stay with me. Because if Chapter 4 is the reckoning, the proof that success and strain come as a pair, Chapter 5 asks the only question that matters. What did they leave behind that we still use today? The echoes, the covers, the bands that borrowed their voice or their voltage, and the reasons the Kinks still feel contemporary every time a young songwriter tries to make a small truth sound huge. What did the world sound like before the Kinks, and what does it still owe them now? Before the Kinks, British pop often aimed for shine. After the Kinks, everyone chased sharper edges and truer stories, permission to be loud, local, and specific. They didn't just sell records, they sold a way to see yourself in a song. That echo hasn't stopped. Spot the lineage. Hear the jam punch David Watts like a schoolyard chant. That's the Kinks wit weaponized. Hear the Pretenders stop your sobbing, open their career. Ray's tune, Chrissy's poise. Hear Van Halen turbocharge You Really Got Me. Dave's torn cone spirit roaring into American hard rock. Fast forward, Blur's Park Life walks the high street the Kinks mapped. Arctic Monkey's character miniatures take Ray's notebook and swap London buses for Sheffield taxis. Even bands who've never studied the catalogue still live inside its blueprints. Short intros, riffs as headlines, verses as cinema. One sample you've heard 1,000 times. Picture book. Its chime and pocket, small room bright, beautifully dry, became a modern ad and TV staple because it feels like memory you can hold. That's a Kinks specialty, making yesterday feel close enough to tap. And on those greatest songs lists, Rolling Stone, NME, Pitchfork, Waterloo Sunset keeps reappearing because it teaches the same lesson each decade. You can make the whole city glow with 2 voices and a careful guitar frame. Freeze the frame. Listen to the craft one more time. The hi-hat sits back, so Ray's consonants land. Bass stays home on the root just long enough to let a melody wander. Dave's guitar doesn't crowd the lyric. It sketches the room the story lives in. This is why copycats never quite feel right. They imitate the accent and miss the timing. Afterlife. Reissues and deep-dive box sets keep unpacking the tapes. Tribute nights and cover bills fold new scenes into old streets. Documentaries and oral histories turn gigs into chapters. Murals, playlists, guitar forums. The fan base does the quiet work of keeping a language fluent. Awards came, too. Ray's CBE is formal recognition of what listeners already knew. He's one of Britain's great writers. Full stop. Why now? What a 2025 ear hears that 1960s radio sometimes missed. In a world of algorithmic polish, the Kinks sound human. Distortion with fingerprints, hooks with eyebrows, choruses that wink and hurt at the same time. Their playbook is a survival kit for young artists. Be specific, keep it short, leave air, tell the truth softly, and it gets louder. Okay, your on-ramp if you're new, or your refresh if you're rusty. Gateway riff. You Really Got Me. All Day and All of the Night. Gateway Story. Waterloo Sunset. Dead End Street. Concept World. The Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society. Play it front to back. American Lift. Lola. A rock and roll fantasy. Come Dancing. Deep Cut Medicine. Shangri-La. Strangers. Two Sisters. Picture Book. Start with 2 tracks today. Waterloo Sunset for the heart. You Really Got Me for the voltage. Then walk into Village Green at night. No skips. Spot the lineage. Cue Blur's End of a Century right after Two Sisters. Same kitchen light, different decade. Then drop the Jam's David Watts beside the Kinks original and feel the baton change hands. In tempo. In teeth. Before the Kinks, UK pop often chased American Polish. After them, Britain trusted its own streets. Accents, flats, trains, jokes, bills, bruises, and sent that truth back across the Atlantic as export. If you were there, you already knew. If you weren't, now you do. Your turn. What was the first Kinks song that hit you in the chest? Which deep cut do we add to the pinned playlist? Strangers, Shangri-La, or something we missed? Drop it in the comments. The best picks go straight into our community mix. This is Pop Lore. Subscribe so this history doesn't get erased by the algorithm, and hit the next episode where we trace the family tree from the Kinks to Britpop. How Ray's street-level cinema becomes Blur's park life, Pulp's common people, and the 90s moment when Britishness led the parade again. The journey doesn't end here, pop lovers. Watch this next.